So welcome back to our episode 7 of Spiritual Shadowboxing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all of us could probably be defined as unstoppable women, but today we have the actual unstoppable woman as our guest, Amira Alvarez. Amira, thank you so much for being with us today.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
So today we have a very different type of conversation than we've been having on the show. We're going to talk about the universal law of gender. We're going to talk about what it means to actually own your own sexuality. We'll probably bring in a little bit of like kundalini energy and masculine, feminine, and just overall, like, what does it mean to live this lit up, delighted life, and like, how does sexuality play into that? So Amira, why don't you start off by just telling us and the rest of the audience like a little bit more about your background and why you're so unstoppable.
Okay, I'll get right to it. So I do think of myself as unstoppable. I have not always been unstoppable. And I do, my company's called The Unstoppable Woman. And it's what I help women step into and actualize in their lives. And I call it unstoppable because there's always more. There's always more life. And there are these places where we hit these blocks, these limitations, these places where we plateau out. And when I was first starting my journey, it was, at a completely different level of just good enough, good life, but not a lit up life. And I had to move through a ton of blocks to really get to a place where I could consistently be unstoppable with myself, where the places where I hit my walls were shorter and less intense so that I could keep growing into more and more life. And this is fundamentally the methodology that I teach and that I help women with. And I start with the money side of things because I'm a business coach as well, and I help people break through financially. However, and to the point of our conversation, part of that for me and my clients, but my journey in particular, has been around this full self-expression and really owning myself and understanding where freedom comes from and stepping out of fear. And I had to learn that through the journey of building my business and income. And we can talk about that if you want. But I made a big leap, 138 to 700K, crossing the 7-figure mark. That whole story happened in part because I started really owning who I was, and that included my sexual energy and the full expression of myself as a woman. And as a result of that, you get to do so much more in your life. And so that's a little crystallization, and we can dig in and talk a lot about it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's dig in. So when we talk about, or you talk about, and I've heard you say this before, we talk about the universal law of gender. What does that actually mean to you? And I'd love, Kelly to chime into this too, because she has a lot to say about masculine and feminine energy. But what does that law of gender really mean to you?
So the law of gender says that you need both masculine and feminine to create. And creative, like sexual energy, where the male and the female come together, creates life. Like we see this in nature, okay? And that sexual energy is creative life force energy. And so as an individual, you want to be accessing that creative life force energy in everything that you do, okay? This is one of the 7 fundamental universal laws that help you execute at higher levels, like stop getting in your own way, right? And oftentimes people are more in their masculine or more in their feminine, and they don't know how to pull those two things together and be in extraordinary creative life force energy. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or if you identify in a different way, we all have masculine energy and feminine energy. Exactly. And when you really are able to own that, like both sides of yourself in all the gray area and the myriad aspects, and you pull it together and you love how it comes together, it like lights up your life, and it makes taking that action, that small thing that you have to do every day to get the results that you want, right? It makes that so much easier because you are your natural self.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, I love what you do, because what I say lately to myself is I'm just getting started. That's kind of been my mantra, I don't care if I'm 50 plus, I'm just getting started. I've been saying that for a while. And it is my mantra. I say it every day when I wake up, when people also try to keep age and gender on top of you. But the idea, and, where I study and my built modality of my spirituality is very focused on the divine feminine and the divine masculine, non-gender, energetic, and spiritual. Okay. And it is always an integration of both aspects within the divine heart and the higher mind. So, people are always, sometimes people get upset and they think it has to do with gender, but you're absolutely right. All of us kind of steer towards one or the other naturally, right? I think especially women, in our century, in our culture, we have a lot of masculine energy, right? Because we have to do, and we have to perform, and we have to feel like we have to compete. And if you take a piece of paper and you write, what are the characteristics of a feminine energy and masculine? The feminine energy is receiving, listening, collaborating, open up, pause, hear. Masculine, do. And also like the toxic masculine, control, so there is a toxic feminine too, so it's not like a feminine is better than the masculine. And like you say, to bring those energies, and I don't know if you guys know the concept of a twin flame, which is something that goes around in the spiritual world. They say is like a separation of your own soul, and that is the masculine and feminine in physical form. But I do believe that the true twin flame is yourself. It is the integration of your masculine self. Oh, that's feminine on the left, masculine on the right. And it is when you understand the integration of that, you become your own twin flame. You become your own lover. You become everything that you need right inside here. And that's the spark that you need to become to light up your life and just get started. Let's throw those out.
Love that.
I'm loving hearing both of you speak. I'm feeling lit up on the inside, just getting the download, the transmission. And I think of, Amira, you're talking about the totality of our human spectrum, which coming from a shadow work background, it's like, yes, because the word I keep hearing is we harness the energy.
Yes.
Get to choose.
Absolutely. Our greatest power is our power to choose, right? We have choice. And when we execute that, we go from victim to creator. Okay. So, it's really like, if someone took one thing away from anything I said right now, like that is the key to freaking freedom right there is 100% personal responsibility. And that requires you to choose. How are you choosing to show up? And for me, if you had looked at me 6 years ago when I first started this phase of my journey, I was, held back. I was worried about what other people would think about me. I didn't know how to be in my body, even though I had been practicing a mind-body integration practice and teaching it for years. Like I just was so disconnected because I quite frankly couldn't own my sexuality. Okay. And I didn't like having sex. I wasn't lit up sexually. I was afraid to have sex. I wasn't having orgasms, right? Like the whole gamut was like completely shut down. I had so much noise around it wasn't safe for me to be a lit up sexual human being in this world. And like, just to connect the dots, like I firmly believe that if you're not tapped into your sexual energy, you're not tapped into creative life force energy. And then it makes, let's bring this to something very tactical. Like you have to write a newsletter, or you have to do something like a sales call in your business, or you want to, I don't know, buy a new house, something, any action that you have to do. You're suppressing yourself. you're tamping down your energy. So then you have to use willpower, that force, because masculine energy gets kind of a bad rap sometimes as like the doing energy, the like, because in our culture it becomes overdoing, but will is a very masculine idea, and will is different than willpower, and will is one of the 6 higher faculties that help you, of your mind, that help you like organize life and execute. So when you're, to just finish that thought, when you're suppressing or you're in denial or you don't love yourself, because I didn't, okay, I thought I liked myself. I thought I loved myself. I could make a great argument then, but I had no context to understand like what that meant. Then you have to use willpower, which is that force that is a kind of a bastardization of will and the masculine active energy.
Right. And I do love how, you know, you talk about like an orgasm and that sexual energy. You're really, you know, concentrating on the lower 3 chakras of the body, 4 in some people's modalities, or the 3 that most people know: the root, the sacral, and the solar plex. And the solar plex is where will is based. That's the energy of will is based within that chakra. But it's also integrated with the sacral, which is water, by the way, water sign. Hello, where's our lady from that we pulled? But it is that fluidity, you know. So even as we're having, I feel like when we have that kundalini experience and we have that going through the lower 3 chakras until it gets into the heart, we do have, like, I feel like, for me, I don't know, myself personally, I believe the solar plex, I feel, is masculine, if you want to call the chakras feminine, masculine, but I feel the sacral is feminine. So I believe that the base is a neutral place where that sexuality and connection to earth begins, pulling it up through the feminine and into the masculine and into the heart. So I think that, you know, my question to you is like, how do you people learn to integrate that sexual entity and sexual energy into understanding how it plays out in their day-to-day life, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a really huge question. I think part of it is, from, at least I'm going to tell my story, and then I'm going to like my perspective from my what I did, and then I'll share a little bit about like how I see it in my clients, and we can kind of triangulate something there. So for me, you know, I was on this path to like build my business, very masculine energy, very like, God damn it, I just want to get there, right? Like I had all sorts of urgency and drive and ambition, and I still have urgency. I mean, you can tell I have a lot of masculine energy, right? I have a lot of drive. I have a lot of ambition. Okay. And it was the willpower. It was the grind. And at first I started to need to learn how to receive, because one of the things that I did to get to the next level, and there's a tactical side that you have to learn, but from the inner game piece, I had to learn how to receive. Okay.
That's trust.
And yeah. You know, I raised my prices, you know, in order to make that leap. It wasn't about working harder. Okay. It was about like a 1% shift, but that 1% shift was a big effing deal. Like I like 5 times my price point, and you know, like you have to be able to hold that. Like even the language that I use, Kelly, on that is like, I say, hold that. That's a feminine energy, right? Like I had to learn how to hold that. And I was really so narrow focused instead of opening to receiving. And so to answer the question specifically, I learned it through an urgent desire, a true burning desire for more life, which was, my goal was to make $1 million that year. Okay. Straight up. And, I really wanted that. Okay. I was like, frickin' A, I want that. And in order to do that, I had to do things differently, different rules. So I had to start opening. Now, did I know that at the time? No. Okay. But what I did know was my vision in my imagination, the vision of who the woman was who made, in my case, was $1 million, right? Like I had some constructed imagination around who this woman was. And I really thought about this. This is a technique that I teach my clients. Who is that woman? Okay. And I started piecing together, okay, that person on stage that I've seen, Susan Sarandon in that baseball movie was pretty effing sexy. And what about that woman in the Thomas Crown affair? I forget what that movie was, but like I was pulling these characters together and oh, she looked pretty sexy and she was put together and she showed up like this and she moved like this and she owned herself like this. And I realized that there was a gap there. There was a big gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. And so I had to do, so now I had the gap that I needed to solve for, okay? And then I had to take the action steps. And for me, that was like getting my nails done. That's not everyone's thing. But like for me, I was someone who couldn't psychologically think that she was worthy of a $45 manicure. Like I just couldn't wrap my hand. Like I remember the first time I got gel nails done, I was like pacing. Like, can I do this? Like, and I had like, is my husband going to judge me? Is this all right? Is this a good use of money? Like the buying decision was as if I was buying a freaking car for or whatever, something that was, you know, 45,000 to 2 million, whatever, a bigger amount. It was a $45 manicure. So I had to do little incremental steps, manicure, getting my hair done, buying nicer clothes, and I had to do it before I was ready. And that was one of the big things that I teach. It's like, you have to, it is faith. You back it up by action. Okay. It's not just like you do the thing and you sit back and hope money rains from the sky to support you. You have to build the business along with it. Right. But in order to step into more life, I had to start living more life.
Yeah. So is it more about like the way that I interpret that is that you're sort of giving a signal to the universe, right? You're saying like, I am worth X, which is worth way more than I thought or have historically thought that I have been worth. So I'm going to go and do this thing. I'm going to go get this manicure. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to spend $1,000 on new clothes, whatever the situation is, right? Even though I may not be in a financial standpoint to do that. Like if someone was looking at my finances conservatively, that may not be a smart thing to do, quote unquote. But I feel like it's so important that I put that energy out there because like, that's what I want to attract back. Right. Is that what you're saying?
The two things on that. Yes. And so one, I could afford a $45 manicure. Sure. It was a self-worth piece. It was a mental self-image of not being that woman.
It was like breaking the habit of being yourself in a way, right?
Yeah, it was breaking the habit of saying I wasn't worth it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
And so worthiness is part of like when a woman like takes care, you tell me what you think about this. I think that women love to adorn themselves. It might look different than the way I like to adorn myself. Okay. But we like attention to our environment, to our style. Okay. And when we are rejecting of that, we are sort of, we reject our feminine energy. And I think men have feminine energy too, and they want to adorn themselves too. I think that's part of that. So that's one thing. And then the second piece, and I learned this from my mentor's mentor, so it kind of goes back a little ways, and I'm happy to share it with you. And this is all around this discussion of flying first class. Like I was taught front of the plane, back of the car. And that triggered the shit out of me when I heard it. I was like, oh, well, aren't you something and blah, 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 you know? But then I was like, okay, my way doesn't work. Okay. Like I've only gotten to here and I want to learn. So they keep saying this, get out of your own way, right? If you weren't triggered about this, what would this actually represent? And I had to hear it like about 4 or 5 times before it dropped in. But it was this, that you don't need more money until there's a reason for you to need more money.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that if I need, like, so the place that people get stuck is like, I can't fly first class because I don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't have the money because you don't need the money. Buy the ticket, then you'll need the money. Then you'll have the money. Okay. There's a little bit of a missing link there, which is you have to take the action to create the money. Okay. But it's true. If you keep saying, my life is good enough here, I'm okay at this standard of living, there is no reason internally to yourself and for the universe to demand of yourself and of the universe more money.
Right.
So you have to put a demand on the universe. I put a demand.
It's like you're tapping into the law of attraction, actually, and
Absolutely.
and also tapping into, people often come from a lack of mentality, and we've talked about that.
Scarcity mindset.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the law of attraction, or quantum physics, like attracts like. So, like, if you need, you're gonna buy that first, class ticket. Yeah, then you're gonna tell the universe, it's like attracting that wealth, and then the worth of what you are, the worth and the wealth, which I think that, Kelly, you talk a lot about in the new business structures, that businesses are looking for worth and wealth. So I think
worthy is the new wealthy.
Yeah, I know.
Favorite line of 2020.
I remember you said that, and I love that
I love it. Rabina Benyon. I can't take credit for it. Rabina Benyon.
Well, I've been repeating it, and I don't know. I don't credit. I'm just like, I heard it.
Start using that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. But Fereshta, I want to bring you in for a second because I'm curious. Like, as we're having this whole conversation, I'm curious from the relationship standpoint. Like, if people are in relationship and their relationship is overall fairly healthy, like fairly good, but that sexual component is not there, what is that indicating? Like from your work, like your shadow work with clients, I'm just curious how that all kind of plays out.
Yes, please tell us.
I first want to really just share, like, I was lit up about the owning your light shadows, Amira, like being like, here are aspects of me I see out there, and I'm going to start cultivating and embodying it. And on the sexual side, Kelly, I feel like, one thing I learned from my mentor is the body doesn't lie. So if it's not happening, there are underlying issues. Yeah. Whether it's, Amira brought up safety, right? We talk about the safe harbor issues. Am I being seen, heard, met, understood, supported? Am I being fully self-expressed and being able to connect with this person? Even like erectile dysfunction, to some degree, is the body not lying? There might be resentments. There might be things going on that are beyond just the physical chemical. So that's my short answer to that.
So underlying issues. Yeah.
I would.
And then
undigested stuff.
Emotions. Yeah. For sure.
It's so interesting. So like if you look at the opposite of that, you have, some clients who are struggling with other things, but they may have like a really healthy sexual relationship, like with their partner. So in those cases, you dive into, some of the emotional things, but I'm curious as to why some emotional issues don't impact sexuality when it is such a huge part of a relationship.
I'd have to think about that one. I think some people connect and mend through sex. So then it can be a healing balm, but I also think it could just be a Band-Aid, depending on the couple. Yeah. Are they actually still also working on what's really up for them? Are they clearing emotional debris as it lands, Or is it going to happen that you're just having that carefree relationship where you're having all the great sex, but you're not really connecting?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
Do you think that some people find safety in sex? Like I found it was unsafe initially, but I think other people, the rest of their life might be in chaos, but like they've always known that to be a safe place for them, so they can just go there.
Yeah, and then depending on the partners, some partners during a fight can connect better through the physical. Versus having to sit and talk through it, right? And it depends on the couple. They have to make agreements on, sometimes, I might not want to be close to my partner physically if we're in conflict. But if that's going to be soothing to him, then we have to sort out, what's the for us solution there.
And I think that's the key word, for us. again, the undigested emotions from either partner has to be resolved, because there won't be that for us. There'll always be that kind of, the I will never become the we, as they say.
Yeah. I'm also curious, like, how does that play out? And this is like a question for anybody who wants to answer it, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, everybody is familiar with the 5 love languages, right? So if one of your top 2 love languages is physical touch, and you're with a partner who either that's not a love language for you, or that's not a top love language for them, like, how do you sort of like reconcile that? Right? Like, that's back to what you were saying. Some people feel more comfortable doing that in conflict, and some people just like communicate better that way. I don't know. It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of shared agreements, sorting this out before the big conflicts are happening. And I always say you have to learn your partner's love languages and their care instructions, because even if they're not yours, like, being self-referential is not going to be a team strategy.
Exactly.
Right? So if my partner, for example, loves words of affirmation, he loves praise and appreciation, I don't need necessarily someone to tell me you're doing a great job at your business. That's not the juice for me.
Right.
When he comes in for a big bear hug, like, I'm done, so he can't give me appreciation to think that's going to land.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like gifts are not at all my love language. Like, gifts and acts of service are like very low on the list. And so, like, in relation to someone who, like, gifts is one of their top love languages, it's like an interesting thing to negotiate, right?
I think with the awareness of what's important, like she said to your partner, that, it's that, understanding about what they care for and what they need. And you have that awareness and that knowledge, then, it's, it will work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think too, though, I think they're obviously based on your relationship with your parents. Like, my father growing up, his way of showing love was always just by doing, or buying things. Like, here's some skis.
Gifts and acts of service, right?
He has some skis, he has a bike, he has new clothes, but he was never there emotionally. So, like, that was his, but it took me, to move through that wound and understand later on in life that is how he expressed love. It wasn't how I thought love was, even as a child. And now, as I move through as an adult and through my different relationships, I have to navigate what I was taught love was and what I want love to be.
That's a really good point.
You know what I mean? We're all still navigating that, right? And I think that comes to understanding about being our own twin flame.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really like that idea of being your own twin flame, because that really, that syncs so well with this law of gender and this internal creative energy that you have, and really filling yourself up, right?
Yeah.
Not being rejecting of others, but also not being dependent on others, right? Because that is, to your point, Kelly, you mentioned scarcity mindset. That's living in fear when you are saying, I need you to fill me.
Right.
Exactly. Fill a need. Exactly. Yeah.
And if you love yourself so much, right? If you fill yourself up so much, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but you just you love yourself. You love your life. You love what you're creating, right? You love who you are.
You love spending time alone.
You love spending time alone. Were we talking
Big
about that,
one?
Kelly?
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah, because it's been interesting with the COVID situation, how people have reacted to that, and the shift to, spending more time alone, right? I love it. It's like, please bring it on more. I don't want people getting sick or anything like that, but it just I enjoy my company. I enjoy other people's company. And then it makes it unconditional, right? And that's not, to your point about how you were raised, Kelly, that's not how I was raised. I was raised with conditional love. You jump through this hoop, you might get attention, which is confused with love,
right?
Confused as love, okay? But that's conditional. Right. And in order to really be in unconditional love, you can't be thinking that you need someone to act and be a certain way, and you only think you need people to act and be in a certain way if you need them to fill you up.
Yeah.
If you don't need them to fill you up, they don't act that. If you don't jive with them, you can love them and keep going.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I just gonna throw this out because I had a long conversation yesterday with a fundamental Christian, and it was but one thing he did say is like the only commandments, and I'm not, this is not me, but I just feel it's relative to what we're talking about. The only commandments is to love God and to love others, right? If you think that God is within and we are God, that's the first commandment, to love ourselves. It's not selfish. It's the most giving thing you can do, because then the second commandment is to love others. So
It makes it pure, right?
Yes.
Then the love that you share with others isn't
based on agenda.
right, because there's some void inside of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've heard it said, like the more that you love yourself, like fully and truly, and the more you can hold yourself,
I love that word, hold. Yeah.
the more it makes closeness possible.
Yes. I agree.
Right? So you're dealing with all different types of attachment styles in your personal relationships, your family relationships, your business relationships, and like figuring out what your attachment style is and figuring out what the other person's attachment style is. It just gives you this ability to navigate, right? And like but if you have yourself, right, and you are completely fulfilled and you're living, this lit up life and you love yourself unconditionally, then like you're saying, Amira, the people that come in and out, like it's fine. You can come in, you can come out. I can choose that. You can choose that. Just don't stand in the door and block the traffic. Right.
And that was a hard one for me to understand, like this idea that like, what is unconditionality in relationship to standards? I had such a hard time wrapping my head around that. Like the unconditional love is like, I love myself. I don't need you to love me to love myself. Like
right.
I'm not asking you to reflect that in order for me to have that. I have that already. What you reflect is a vibrational attraction. It's bonus. Right. Standards are, I'm not available for this kind of a behavior. Like I'm not available for, I don't know, I can't even think of something. Like
verbally abusive or something.
Yeah, like that's just not in my frame of reference right now. But like if let's say you're in a great relationship and someone's always 15 minutes late, or it wouldn't bother me that much, but let's say that bothers you a ton. And that's a standard for you, like being prompt. Like you have to decide whether, okay, that's a standard for me. I'd like to have a conversation. And to your point, I'm going to pronounce your name, Fereshta. I got it.
Took me 2 months. Go ahead.
But around agreements, like you have a standard, and I believe in I keep raising my standards. That's part of how this internal standards and external standards.
And I love that you use the word standard, by the way, instead of boundaries, which I think it can be overused. And I think, yes, of course you have to have your boundaries. But with boundaries, I feel like and maybe Fereshta can comment on that, I feel like they tend to be the line in the sand. I think with standards, they change as you grow.
Well, that's interesting.
I like to throw that out to you guys and get your opinion on that,
Yeah, I think of caring boundaries being really the standards, right? Like, here's what I need, here's a clear ask, I'm setting getting buy-in, we get a shared agreement. And what happens with some people is their boundaries are so porous for so long that they go into really rigid boundaries. So you get that passive aggressive quality, but an assertive boundary is saying, hey, I actually care about us, so I need this level.
Right. I like that. Yeah, that's great.
And I also love the other side, which is if you have your own back, you're fulfilling in your life. You're not leaking energy when someone else doesn't show up perfectly, because people are messy. You're just
and you can't control how they show up.
Oh,
good luck with that. You're just setting yourself up for failure.
Right. If they were perfect, you'd have to be perfect. Oh my God. Right.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want a perfect partner. Yeah. First of all, it doesn't exist. And second of all, it'd be fucking boring. It'd be so boring.
I think one of my favorite words in the Peruvian language is munai, M-U-N-I. and it's having unconditional affection and high regard for yourself and others, you know, within the confines of like people make mistakes, people are messy, and that we have that sort of self-empathy. I love the idea of unconditional affection towards oneself.
What's the word in the Peruvian language again?
Munai, M-U-N-I.
Munai. Okay, great.
That's beautiful.
You know, Kelly, your comment about standards versus boundaries, I think standards to me, and like you talked about, you keep raising your standards. To me, that relates back to what we were talking about around worth and self-worth. Like that's, and then connecting it to what you said just now about boundaries and external, like having to have rigid boundaries when you're porous.
Yeah.
When you keep raising your standards for yourself and your self-worth, then it's easy to have, like you have internal boundaries. You don't need, like, it's just who you are. So you don't need to force something. And then when you're confronted by a place where, oh, that doesn't feel good, or I'm thrown out of heaven, right? I'm in a wobble here. Something's happened then you realize, oh, that's internal work that I have to do.
Right.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's,
Yeah.
you know.
They're just opportunities. They're just like any time that there's like a trigger or something along those lines that just like highlights for you, like, oh, I wonder why I reacted that way, or I wonder why I got emotional about this, or I wonder what's going on. Like, what's the why under the why? It's just an opportunity to do a little bit more growing. And when you're in that place where in that moment where something comes up and you're like, oh, what a gift this is. This is such an opportunity for me to like do a little bit more self-work. You're like, oh man, I'm like crushing it. I mean, I don't have that a lot, but I mean, when I do have it, I'm like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good about myself right now.
I think you're blushing.
I mean, I'm always blushing.
No, I'm just kidding.
I feel like that's the abundance mindset of, oh, this is an invitation, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes from Alanis Morissette was, we found that conflict was ripe with unmet needs.
Yeah.
So if we focused on what's being unmet for you or for me,
Oh, that's awesome.
that soothed what was happening with the nervous system. And I think we can do that internally, like, okay, that was janky. What am I needing to understand, digest, up level, you know, as Amira is saying, like, maybe that's speaking to one of my values, and maybe that's a standard I need to really uphold people around me.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I love it.
Can I share a personal story about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm in this great relationship now, different relationship than before. And sex is great. The relationship's great. It's all great.
He's going to love this show, by the way.
Yeah, he's going to be like, you're talking about our sex again. You know, like, you can't stop, can you? Anyways, there was this point maybe 6 months ago where, for a variety of different reasons, he broke up with me. He was very much in his mission. I need to focus. I don't have, like, I'm not showing up in this relationship the way I want to show up. And I can't do this and feel good about myself. And, you know, I was like, and I was adulting in the moment. And then, you know, there's a place where you're like, okay, this sucks. This hurts, right? Like, this isn't what I want. Is all my goodness going away? And it really forced me to see that gap. Like, who did I need to be in order to not lower my standard, right? About how I love myself. Like this is a push comes to shove, rubber meets the road kind of thing, right? Like, okay, do you really love yourself? Like, if you really loved yourself, like, are you going to grieve? Are you going to like lick your wounds? What does this mean? And it took an afternoon. It wasn't like, yeah, I'm just flipping the switch, but an afternoon compared to previous breakups, you know, and
Months.
things like that, months, right? You know, it was really like, how do I say this? I called myself to higher standard. I used this process that we're talking about, which is, okay, who do I want to be in this moment, right? Do I want to be someone who feels like her life is over because of this shift? Or do I want to be someone who sees this as an opportunity and
Yeah.
That's my stance. That's what I teach. This is what I live. If I'm going to be a teacher of this, I am going to freaking live it. I'm not going to let myself off the hook. And who do I need to be? Okay, well, I need to be someone who is, you know, who loves herself, who understands that there's always something better. You're stepping into opportunities, right? Like, and I coached myself in the moment, and quite frankly, I used my manifestation powers, right? And got very clear about what I wanted. And, you know, I stopped and I said, you know, is this the relationship, right? Is this the right now in this moment in time? Because we can only make decisions in the moment. Like, is this the relationship? And it was a yes. So then I didn't let the relationship go. I went on about my life. I love my life, and I didn't let it go. And then, you know, a month and a half later, we're back together. It's better than ever. It gets better, all of that. So why did I bring that up? I want to make a full circle. Like, that's about like that self-love, and really in the moments when it's hard, owning that, because that's where you actually do get to the next level of self-worth.
Exactly.
Okay. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, I guess, is what I really want to say.
And you made some very valid points in that beautiful story that you shared. And thank you for sharing. You know, first of all, is you have the emotion, you should experience the emotion.
Right. We're human.
You know, the grief, the sorrow, you know, everything that you're feeling, and it's good and appropriate to feel them as much as you can feel them, because I feel like once you really like embrace, like Mark Singer and the Tethered Soul says, like, you should feel love as much as you should feel sorrow. You know, you should just really embrace it, and as you embrace it, like, and Kelly and I talked about the time of recovery from those experiences to coaching yourself to be on the other end shortens.
It can happen in a matter of hours now.
And in understanding the process of, I'm going to grieve, I'm sorrow, I'm going to experience that, and as much as I'm going to embrace it as much as I will love and joy, because it's a valid emotion. And then I'm going to coach myself, and like I said, and you move to the other side. And I've seen you do it, Kelly, in a matter of like hours or a day. You know, it's so. Yeah. I think the more work we do with each other and for each other, that transition happens a lot sooner.
Yeah. You're doing your emotional reps, right? You're building that attitudinal muscle that says, yeah, I can have the moment, I can honor the feelings, and I'm a big fan of, like, I don't need to be happy all the time. I want to be in harmony with what's coming up. I want to be with.
That's beautiful.
Be a friend to what's coming up inside, and you actually ride that wave faster. So you're not suppressing it and then letting it be this dark cloud for days or weeks.
Yeah.
And I love, Amira, this idea of, when I coach people, if we're talking about a 5-year plan, and we look at, okay, what's that woman doing that you're not doing, right? Like, what is she doing? How is she being? What choices is she making? What risks is she taking? And then coming back to today and going, so what's different about what you're doing versus what she's doing? And then working to bridge that gap. It's so intuitive.
Yeah. It is, and it uses the imagination. Okay. And I think I think imagination is something we're all born with. And as kids, we naturally imagine things, right? Like it's part of our nature. And yet it's culturally kind of shut down and wound out of us. And it's so much a part of how we can create what we want, because it starts in your mind's eye, right? Yeah. And so if you can see who she is, or what the relationship is, or what the business is, I mean, it can be around anything, but like, you know, who do I really want to be, right? And that comparison and seeing the gap, right? And then the thing that I think some people miss there is, what is the action that you have to take? How do you actually have to show up in this 3D physical world that solidifies that next step? Yeah.
I love that. You know, Dr. Joe Dispenza, I don't know what I'm calling it. He often says, I studied with him many years, you know, it's envisioning your future self, right? Yeah. And again, the law of attraction, by envisioning that, he says, and I believe that with gratitude, the emotion of gratitude is how we work in the three-dimensional energy. We bring that future self to ourselves in feminine energy because we receive and we allow. You know, that's just, you know, I mean, I'm sure there's, you know, that's the big thing is how do we do this in three-dimensional world? That's the big question, you know, in these earth suits, as Tony said, right? Which I loved. He said, earth
I love that too.
Well, I also feel the spiritual realm is really efficient. You know, I mean, as much as you've got your A to Z plan, it's got to be practical. It's got to be grounded in inspired right action every day. And then the spiritual realm feels really efficient to me. I was talking to a coach yesterday, and she said, "Who's your ideal client?" And she wanted me to name a person. And I was like, oh, the shaman I've talked to before. I dig helping helpers. And 3 minutes later, I got an email from her, and I was like, this is blowing my mind. Because, you know, if I had strategized and sort of that faux masculine of how do I do this? And like, that wouldn't have worked. This was just like, I don't know, radar love, like telepathy.
No, yeah, that's being in the power of gratitude. You were like, that's synchronicity, baby. That's working it. I love that.
Talk about the acceleration point between what you think and right.
That's fifth dimension. You have to slip right into fifth dimension right there.
Yeah. I wanna kind of bring this back a little bit to the idea of like kundalini energy though for a second, because now we're talking about, you know, a couple of things like that. And manifestation or Amira, the way that you said it was like, or maybe it was Fereshta, like the idea of you imagining or visualizing what you want or what you look like or feel like, or I always refer to it in my work with Fereshta as like the essence. Like there was an essence of the relationship, not necessarily the partner, but an essence of the relationship that I knew. It was so clear to me. And one day I decided to just like write down this whole entire list. It was like 4 pages long of the relationship that I want, right? And I was just rereading it before we jumped onto this recording, because I'm like, I'm just curious, like, what did I say about anything that had to do with like the sexuality component of that relationship? And I'm going to read it. It's like 1 paragraph, but I think it's very interesting to look at. I wrote this probably, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, something like that. And I had no idea like if and when this was ever going to come into my life, but like I had a pretty deep knowing about how clear I was, right? So I'm just going to read this. I mean, it's a little embarrassing, but I don't care. Mm-hmm. So the part of this, the relationship I want, when I got to the sexual component, I said, our lovemaking is amazing, sensual, exhausting, and often. We explore each other and new ways of creating sacred pleasure. Sometimes we just fall asleep on one another, which makes us just as happy. We love the look and feel of each other's smiles and bodies. We each have our favorite parts. We heal through sacred sexuality to deepen our physical, spiritual connection, and we understand the power of kundalini because we experience it together. Mm. And I was like, that's what I want. Who's signing up?
I have that too.
Yeah, and that was it, you know, and
you found someone.
That's awesome.
I mean, yeah, I am happy to report, box checked.
Love it.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing. It's about not limiting what that might look like for you, even if it's not what historically has been in your life ever, or it's not your current, it's not your present. It doesn't mean that cannot exist. I mean, I didn't even know that there was like other humans who would be able to not only check that box, but like every other thing on that list. And all I'm saying is that there's so much possibility that's created when you live this life like that, you know. And listen, I don't have it all put together. I'm constantly navigating and shifting and learning every single day, right? Like I have so much work to do, but also it feels like in harmony or in alignment with like what I had envisioned. Started working with Fereshta a year and a half ago, and my life is completely different. I'm a completely different person.
Love it.
I'm going to assert you're more of you.
Thank you for that correction, because that is true. I am more, I'm going to actually say it differently, just to act as a model. Yes, I am more myself now than I have ever been. And who I was prior to that felt like a mask. It felt like, you started off saying in the beginning of the show, it felt like you were very uncomfortable in your skin. You didn't love yourself, certainly not to the level that you do now. Like, I resonated with all of that in your story, because that's exactly how I felt. I didn't think that I was worth it. I felt that I had to earn love. And there's no way that you can be fully expressed, especially not sexually, when you're like that. And I'm a Scorpio, so like sexual expression, not a problem. But when you are not living in your full expression, that's a big knock. Like, that's a big hit, and it impacts everything else.
I want to assert too that 4-page document was like your moonshot, like shooting for the moon, and then you did the work to become an energetic match to it.
Yeah, I did a lot of work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, I can't be overlooked. There's no shortcut here for cleaning up the internal game, whatever you want to call that. The programming, the misconceptions of self, the internal muck and blocks, and the stuff that has us hooked and isn't the truth of who we are, but we're attached to it because it's become our norm, and it's what we know, and it's what feels comfortable in a sick and twisted backwards way. It's not what we consciously want, but it's what we keep returning to because it's
zone of familiarity, right?
Correct. And you really have to do that deep inner unpacking and bringing light to the dark, and just, I call it transparency, right? Like, you have to be 100% transparent with yourself and recognize the truth of what's happening right now, and that dissonance between, like, consciously I want this, but unconsciously this is how I'm showing up. And to really just breathe into that, and let's move through it and surrender to it with a clear vision of where you're going, though, not surrender to it like let it take over.
Right. And that's really the integration of the masculine and feminine, right? Surrender to it, and then still have the action, the vision, and then execute. Yeah,
absolutely. And you need, and I find I would imagine you guys would agree with me that it's iterative, right? It happens at once, and then it's also iterative. That's my experience of it. There's an integrating, and then there are times where I have to consciously be more in my feminine, and I have to consciously be more in my masculine. It's kind of funny to say consciously in my feminine, but like intentionality around it.
That makes complete sense, actually.
Yeah, but it also exists. I'm sorry, Cal, go ahead.
No, I just says because we are in a 3-dimensional world and we are navigating. So I think it makes complete sense. I think once the integration happens and you feel you have to be more intentional, female or masculine in the sense of energy, I think that still, obviously that doesn't negate the fact that it's been integrated, and it is still a balance. It just kind of ebbs and flows, or like a yin yang symbol. It just kind of, it's emerging, but also the energy can, move within the sphere of it.
Yeah.
Or it can go right,
spiral.
Or the energies can spiral, right?
Yeah.
Right. You're like integrating, and then there's a next level, and then there's an integration, and then there's an level.
That's the visual that I associate the most. And I was going to say, like, from that standpoint, yes, you're integrating, but also this idea of like feminine energy and masculine energy inside of one body, it exists on a continuum, right? And then because it exists on a continuum, regardless of whether you're in a heterosexual relationship or not, you have this like fluidity that is a really nice play between the two people, right? Like, you could have great sex with your boyfriend, and he could, want to be held one night, right? And he could present as much more feminine, and you could present as more masculine. There's something really beautiful about that. And I think for me, that's what like sexual expression is all about, is that the fluidity of those roles and those energies. I think that's actually what makes sensuality and intimacy and affection, like super interesting.
Yeah, and it's so important, the fluidity that you talk about. I think, and the social norms that the paradigms of those that are shifting and changing need to, because it's, you know, and men were not allowed, the generations past, to be feminine in their energy, to be in a place of allowing, receiving, wanting just to be whole. They were taught not to, from, you know, until maybe the last few, you know, in the last few moments. I don't know when it started to shift, 10, 20 years ago, but, you know, my father, his grandfather, that ancestral lineage, they were taught, like, no, men don't cry. So, you know, it's an unlearning of that, you know. Mm-hmm. That's why I love fluidity. I love the whole term fluidity when it comes to sexuality, you know.
I love that word paired with attunement. I know it's not the sexiest word, but like attuning to each other throughout. So
I don't know. We could make it sexy. Attunement can be sexy.
And I'm very
all in the energy
stuff too.
I love it. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Amira, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I hope everyone had fun, and we will see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.